There is a person you cannot stop thinking about. Maybe you know exactly who it is. Maybe the name arrived in your mind before you even finished reading that sentence. Maybe it is someone you are with right now, someone you share a bed with, someone whose coffee cup is still on your counter, and yet the thinking never stops. The wondering never stops. The strange ache of wanting more of something you cannot name never stops. Maybe it is someone you lost, someone who left, or someone that you left, or someone who was never fully yours to begin with. Maybe it is someone you have barely spoken to, someone you have seen a handful of times, exchanged a few sentences with, and yet they have moved into your mind like they were always going to live there, like the room was already furnished before they arrived. You replay conversations, not just the good ones, all of them. You replay the moment you first noticed them, the exact quality of light, the exact thing they said, or the way they laughed, or the way they looked at something across the room when they thought no one was watching. You construct imaginary conversations that have not happened yet, playing both parts, anticipating their responses, feeling something almost like the real thing inside a scene that exists only in your head. You hear a song and they appear. You see something strange or beautiful or funny, and your first instinct is to tell them. You go to sleep, and they follow you there. And the strangest part, the part that nobody talks about, is that you cannot fully explain why. You cannot point to a specific quality and say, that is the reason. There are other people who are just as kind, just as interesting, just as beautiful, just as funny, and none of them have done this to you. None of them have gotten inside the machinery of your mind and rearranged the furniture, and yet this one person, this specific face, this particular voice, has. It does not feel like a choice. It feels like something that happened to you, like weather, like gravity. Most people call this a crush, or infatuation, or falling in love. And the advice they get is either to chase it or to suppress it or to wait for it to pass. What almost nobody does is ask the deeper question. Not what is happening on the surface, but what is happening underneath. Not what you should do about it, but what it means that it is happening at all. Plato asked that question. 2,400 years ago, in a text called the Symposium, he gathered a group of people around a dinner table and refused to let the experience of obsessive love be explained away as biology or weakness or bad timing. He looked directly at the feeling of being consumed by another person and said, "There is something here that deserves real investigation. Something that is trying to tell you something important. Something that points, if you are willing to follow it far enough, beyond the person themselves and toward the deepest truth about what you are and what you are actually looking for." What he found will not make the obsession stop, but it will change what you think the obsession means, and that might be more useful than stopping it. Before we get to what Plato actually believed, you need to understand what the Symposium is and why it is unlike almost anything else he wrote. The Symposium is not a treatise. It is not an argument laid out in formal philosophical steps. It is a dinner party. A group of Athenian men, poets and politicians and philosophers and a general, gather at the home of a playwright to drink wine and celebrate. Someone proposes that instead of drinking themselves into the ground, each person give a speech in praise of Eros, in praise of love. Each person will give their version, their theory, their best understanding of what this force actually is and where it comes from and what it wants from us. Some of the speeches are beautiful. Some of them are wrong in ways that feel uncomfortably familiar. The speech by Phaedrus is about love as a source of honor. The speech by Pausanias divides love into the common kind and the heavenly kind. The physician Eryximachus turns love into a cosmic ordering principle, a force that governs not just human desire, but the balance of the body and the patterns of the seasons. And then there is Aristophanes, the comedian. And his speech is the one most people have heard of, even if they have never read Plato. We will come back to him, because what he says is not true in the way philosophy is true, but it is true in the way myths are true, which is a different kind of truth, and sometimes more important. And then Socrates speaks. And what Socrates says is not his own view. He says he is reporting what a woman named Diotima taught him. Diotima of Mantinea, a wise woman, possibly a priestess. Someone Socrates describes as having a profound understanding of love that surpassed anything he had encountered in philosophy. And Plato, through the voice of Socrates, gives this woman the most important speech in the entire dialogue. Think about that for a moment. Plato has Socrates, the most celebrated philosopher in the history of Athens, say that a woman taught him the deepest truth about love, that framing is deliberate. Plato is signaling something. He is saying this subject demands a different kind of knowing, not just logical argument, something older, something closer to wisdom than to argument. What Diotima described and what Plato preserved through her voice is one of the most radical and psychologically precise ideas in the history of human thought. The idea that when you cannot stop thinking about someone, you are not experiencing a malfunction. You are not experiencing weakness or irrationality, or some biological glitch that evolution installed in you for reproductive purposes. You are experiencing the first stirring of a hunger that is trying to take you somewhere. A hunger that is older than your body and more fundamental than your personality. A hunger that is, if you are willing to take it seriously, the beginning of the only journey that actually matters. To understand what Plato meant about love, you need to understand what he believed about reality. And we have gone deep into this on this channel before, but here is the version that matters specifically for what we are talking about today. Plato believed that everything you can see and touch and hear and measure is a copy. Not a worthless copy, not a meaningless copy, but a copy nonetheless. A shadow of something more real that exists beyond the physical world entirely. He called these originals the forms. And the forms are not ideas in the sense of thoughts someone had or concepts that live inside minds. They are the actual structures of reality, the blueprints, the eternal patterns that physical things imperfectly imitate. There is a form of justice, and every just act in the physical world is a partial, imperfect expression of that form. There is a form of equality, and every time you recognize two things as equal, you are recognizing a shadow of that form. There is a form of goodness, which Plato considered the highest of all forms, the source of being and truth for everything else. And there is a form of beauty, and this is where it becomes personal. Because Plato believed that your soul, before it entered your body, before you were born into this particular life with this particular face and these particular circumstances, existed in direct contact with the forms. Your soul knew beauty itself. Not beautiful things, not instances of beauty. Beauty as it actually is, in its full reality, without being filtered through a body or a face or a voice or the specific quality of light on a particular afternoon. And then you were born, and the contact faded, and the memory of what you once knew became buried under experience and language and the thousand small concerns of living in a physical world. And now you move through life surrounded by copies of things you once knew directly. And every now and then, a copy is beautiful enough, is real enough, is close enough to the original that something in you responds. Something in you recognizes it, not the person. Not quite. What you recognize is the form of beauty shining through them, the original peeking through the copy. And your soul, which once knew the original in full, responds to even this partial glimpse with everything it has, because it remembers, not consciously, not in a way you can articulate, but somewhere beneath the level of thought and choice, it remembers what it once knew, and the sight of even a fraction of that knowledge, reflected imperfectly through a human face, is enough to stop the machinery of your normal life and make everything else feel less important. That is why it feels so enormous. That is why a person you barely know can take over your entire inner world. You are not responding to their personality. You are not responding to their specific qualities, their humor, their intelligence, their kindness, even though those things are real and they matter. What you are responding to, underneath all of that, is something eternal that is using them as a vessel, something your soul knew before you were born, that is briefly, imperfectly, achingly visible in this particular face at this particular moment. Diotima did not call this experience love. She called it Eros, and the distinction matters. Eros for the ancient Greeks was not just romantic feeling. Eros was a fundamental force, a cosmic principle of longing and reaching and seeking. It was the force that moves things toward what they truly need, not what they think they need, not what they have been told they need, what they actually, at the deepest level, require. Diotima described the nature of Eros through a myth about its origins. She said Eros is not a god. Eros is a daimon, a being in between the mortal and the divine, whose function is to mediate between human longing and divine truth, to carry things upward from the world of copies toward the world of originals. And she described his parentage this way. Eros is the son of Penia and Poros, the son of poverty and resource. His mother is lack itself. His father is abundance, the overflowing fullness of divine wisdom and being. And because of this parentage, Eros is always in between. He is never fully satisfied because he carries his mother's hunger in him always. But he is never hopeless, never idle, never inert, because he carries his father's resourcefulness, his father's drive toward what is good and true. Eros is always reaching, always moving. He glimpses something beautiful and moves toward it. He reaches it, and the beauty shifts, reveals something beyond itself, and he moves again. He is never at rest, not because he is broken, because that is what he is. That is his nature and his function. He is the force of ascent, the engine of the soul's return to what it once knew. And when you cannot stop thinking about someone, that is Eros. That specific, restless, consuming, wonderful, maddening energy that will not let you sleep and will not let you focus and keeps returning to one face, one voice, one presence. That is not malfunction. That is Eros doing exactly what Eros does. He has seen something real in that face and he is pulling you toward it. The question, the only question that matters, is whether you understand what he is actually pulling you toward. This is where Diotima introduces what has become known as the ladder of beauty. And it is one of the most important psychological and philosophical frameworks ever constructed around human longing, because it does not dismiss the obsession. It does not tell you to suppress it or spiritualize it away or get some perspective. It takes the obsession completely seriously and then shows you that it is the beginning of something much larger than you realized. The ladder has rungs, and most people never leave the first one. The first rung is a single beautiful body. You see someone. Something in you responds. The machinery starts. The thinking begins. The face appears at random moments throughout your day. You are on the first rung of the ladder and you believe you have arrived at the destination. You believe that what you want is that specific person, that what Eros is asking for is them. And so you orbit them or you pursue them or you lose them and spend years trying to recreate the exact quality of that first feeling in someone who has their eyes or laughs the same way. Plato is not criticizing this. He is not saying the response is wrong or shallow or unworthy. The response is real. Eros is real. The beauty you are responding to is real. But Diotima says that if you pay attention, if you actually follow the feeling rather than fixing it permanently onto the person, you begin to notice something. The second rung is the recognition that beauty in one body is related to beauty in all bodies. What this means in practice is something like this. There is a quality in the person you cannot stop thinking about that activated something in you. A quality that made you feel seen, or alive, or like the world had suddenly come into focus. And when you look honestly at that quality, when you try to name it even imprecisely, you begin to realize it is not entirely unique to them. You see something related to it elsewhere, in a different face, in a different kind of presence, in someone who does not look like them at all, and yet carries a similar quality of being. And this recognition, if you are honest with it, does something important. It loosens the grip slightly, not because the feeling gets smaller, because it gets bigger. Because you begin to understand that what you fell for was not a person in their complete specificity. What you fell for was something that person was carrying. And that thing can be carried by others. That thing exists in the world in multiple places. It is not imprisoned in one body. The third rung is the recognition of beauty in souls rather than bodies. You begin to notice that the quality you were responding to exists, sometimes even more purely, in people who might not be physically striking at all. You meet someone whose way of thinking takes your breath away. Someone whose honesty is so consistent and so costly that being near it feels like being near something real in a world of performances. Someone whose care for other people is not performed, but structural, built into the way they move through the world. And you realize that the body was never what you were after. The body was a signal. What you were after was the quality of the soul behind it. The fourth rung is the recognition of beauty in knowledge and activity. The same quality that you first recognized in a face, you begin to see in ideas, in the way a mathematical proof has the quality of inevitability, in the way a piece of music resolves, in the way a philosophical argument, when it is true, carries a kind of necessity that feels almost physical. The feeling does not diminish. It expands. It starts appearing in places you would never have expected to find it. Because what you were always responding to was not a person or a body or even a soul in isolation. It was the presence of something true, something real. And truth does not live in only one place. And then the final rung, the thing the ladder was always leading toward, beauty itself. Not a beautiful thing, not a beautiful person, not a beautiful idea. Beauty as it actually is, the form, the original, eternal, unchanging, not mixed with flesh or color or the specific circumstances of a human life. Not beautiful in relation to anything else, not beautiful from one angle and less beautiful from another. Simply, purely, absolutely beautiful. The thing that every beautiful thing you have ever encountered was a copy of. And Diotima says that when someone reaches this, when someone follows Eros all the way up the ladder, rather than getting stuck somewhere in the middle, what they experience is not just satisfaction. It is not just understanding. They give birth, she says, to true virtue. They produce something real. They touch, in whatever way a human being can touch it, actual truth, actual being. They become, for a moment, more than mortal in their knowing. Now here is the part of this that will either comfort you or disturb you, depending on where you are right now and how honest you are willing to be with yourself. The person you cannot stop thinking about is not who you think they are inside your mind. What lives in your head is not them. It is an image, a construction, a vessel you have filled, largely without realizing it, with everything that your soul is longing for, every quality you recognized in them, every moment that felt significant, every conversation that felt like recognition. All of it has been assembled into something that is partly them and partly a projection of your own deepest hungers onto their specific face. This is not a criticism. It is not a pathology. It is what Eros does. He shows you what you are longing for by showing you someone who carries a trace of it. And then your mind, your image-making, storytelling mind, takes that trace and builds a whole world around it. Because what you are actually longing for is so large and so formless that your mind cannot hold it directly. So it gives you a face instead, something specific, something it can return to, something it can organize the longing around. And the reason the obsession is so powerful is not because the person is uniquely irreplaceable. It is because what they woke up in you is real. And now that it is awake, it does not want to go back to sleep. What you experienced was genuine. The recognition was genuine. The feeling of Eros moving through you was genuine. But the mistake, the one that keeps most people stuck on the first rung of the ladder forever, is believing that the face is the destination. Almost everyone who has ever finally gotten the person they could not stop thinking about has eventually discovered what Plato was pointing at. Not in the first rush of it, not in the early weeks or months when everything is new, and the longing is being answered, and Eros is, briefly, satisfied. But at some point, usually quietly, usually without drama, the person becomes ordinary. Not because they changed, not because love died, not because something went wrong, but because the form cannot live permanently in any one body. The light moves, and the vessel that once seemed to contain everything gradually reveals itself as just a person. Wonderful, complicated, limited, real, just a person. And the longing surfaces again, searching for a new face. Plato would not call that tragedy. He would call it Eros doing what Eros does when it is not understood. When you hand it a person and say, "Stay here," and it agrees for a while, and then it remembers that it was never trying to stay anywhere. It was trying to ascend. Now, we need to go back to Aristophanes, because his speech, even though Plato places it in the mouth of a comedian and does not fully endorse it, contains a truth that the philosophical argument needs. Aristophanes tells a myth. He says that human beings were not always the way we are now. Originally, we were whole, complete spherical creatures with 4 arms and 4 legs and 2 faces looking in opposite directions. We were powerful and self-sufficient and arrogant. So arrogant that we tried to climb up to the realm of the gods and challenge them directly. Zeus, faced with the choice between destroying us and diminishing us, chose to diminish us. He cut every human being in half, split each whole creature into 2 separate people, and scattered the halves across the world. And ever since that moment, every human being you see walking around is a half, incomplete, carrying the memory of wholeness without being able to quite remember what it felt like. And Eros, says Aristophanes, is the longing to be whole again. It is the desire of each half to find its other half, to return to the original unity. That is why when you meet someone who activates Eros in you, the feeling says, this is the one. This is what was missing. This is the half I was separated from. The feeling has the quality of recognition, of return, of coming home to something you did not know you had lost. Plato includes this myth deliberately. He is not dismissing it. He is using it to point at something real, because the feeling of recognition is real. The sense of homecoming is real. But Diotima's version, the version Socrates then offers, says that Aristophanes has the right feeling, but the wrong destination. The other half you are looking for is not another person. It is yourself, not your personality, not your habits or your preferences, or the collection of roles you play in your daily life. Your deeper self. The self that existed before the body and knows the forms. The part of you that is not entirely of this world. The part that catches a glimpse of beauty through another person's face and recognizes it from somewhere older than your memory. That recognition, that sense of homecoming, is real. But you are not coming home to them. You are, through them, coming home to yourself. The person woke something up in you that was already there, already yours, already waiting. And now that it is awake, the question is whether you let it go back to sleep when the feeling fades or whether you follow it to its source. There is a practical dimension to all of this that Plato does not spell out directly, but that lives in everything he wrote. The obsession is information. When you cannot stop thinking about someone, your mind is not malfunctioning. Your soul is trying to tell you something. Not about them, necessarily. About you. About what you are longing for underneath the longing. About what quality in them activated something in you that had been dormant. Something that had been waiting to be recognized. So, the question worth asking, the one most people never ask because they are too busy either chasing the person or trying to suppress the feeling, is this. What is it specifically? What is the quality? What did you see in them or feel near them that made the machinery start? Is it their certainty? The way they seem to know what they think and are not afraid to say it? Is it their freedom? The way they seem to move through the world without the constant background noise of other people's opinions? Is it their attention? The specific quality of being seen by them? The sense that when they looked at you, they actually registered something real? Is it their honesty? The way they said the true thing instead of the comfortable thing? Is it the way they seem to be living in alignment with something? The sense that their life had a direction and a coherence that yours has been missing? Whatever it is, that quality is not in them. It lives in them the way the sun lives in a reflection on water. The reflection can show you where the sun is. It can show you that the sun exists, but the sun is not in the water, and you cannot get to the sun by staring at the water. Whatever you saw in them is something your soul recognized because it already knows it, because you once knew it fully. And the obsession is your soul pointing in the direction of its source, not toward the person, through them. This does not mean the person does not matter. It does not mean the relationship does not matter. It means the relationship is most real, most honest, most alive, when both people understand that what is moving between them is something larger than both of them. When neither person mistakes the vessel for the source. When the love between them is not a closing off from the world, but an opening towards something neither of them could reach alone. Plato believed that the highest form of love is not possession. It is not completion in the Aristophanic sense, two halves clinging together against the world, each one making the other's incompleteness livable. It is something more active than that, more demanding, more generous. He called it, through the voice of Socrates, a kind of philosophical midwifery. The idea that real love, Eros operating at its highest and most honest level, helps the other person give birth to what is already inside them, to the truest version of themselves, to the ideas and the qualities and the capacities that exist in them, but have not yet found their way out. Socrates said, this is what he did in dialogue. He did not teach. He did not have knowledge that he poured into empty vessels. He helped people give birth to what was already in them, already known somewhere beneath the surface of their habitual thinking. And he saw love working the same way. The best love does not create the other person in your image. It helps them become more fully themselves. And in doing so, it helps you become more fully yourself. Because the act of genuinely seeing another person, of helping them give birth to what is real in them, requires you to be more honest and more present and more real than you would otherwise manage to be. This is why the best relationships do not feel like two people completing each other. They feel like two people facing the same direction, moving towards something neither of them can fully see, but both of them can feel pulling at them, using each other not as destinations but as mirrors, as lanterns, as evidence that the thing they are both reaching toward is real because they can see a reflection of it in each other. When you are with someone and you become more yourself, more honest, more willing to ask the hard questions and sit with the uncomfortable answers, more alive to what actually matters and less distracted by what does not, that is Eros, doing what Plato said it was always trying to do. Not binding you to another person, pulling you through another person toward what is real. There is one final thing worth sitting with before we close. Plato wrote the Symposium at some point in the 4th century BC. The specific year is debated, but what is not debated is that the ideas in it have survived intact for nearly 2,500 years. They have survived because they are describing something that does not change. The feeling of being unable to stop thinking about someone has not changed. The quality of that recognition, that sense of something enormous moving through the ordinary machinery of attraction, has not changed. What changes is whether you have a framework for understanding what it means. Most of the frameworks available to you right now will reduce it. They will tell you it is dopamine and oxytocin. They will tell you it is attachment style and childhood pattern recognition. They will tell you it is projection and idealization and the temporary insanity of new love. And they are not wrong, exactly. Those things are real. But they are descriptions of the mechanism, not the meaning. They tell you how the machine works. They do not tell you what the machine is for. Plato tells you what it is for. It is for assent, for remembering, for the gradual, difficult, beautiful process of following the thread of longing back through every beautiful thing that has ever moved you until you arrive somewhere you recognize. Not because you have been there before in this life, because you have been there before in a life your mind cannot access but your soul has not forgotten. The person you cannot stop thinking about handed you the first rung of a ladder. They did not know they were doing it. You did not know you were receiving it. But Eros does not require understanding to do his work. He only requires that you feel him, that you take the feeling seriously, that you do not explain it away or suppress it or reduce it to something smaller than it is. The feeling is not small. It never was. So why can you not stop thinking about someone? Because your soul is not asleep. Because something in you still carries the memory of what it once knew directly. Because you moved through the world in the ordinary way, half awake, managing the concerns of daily life, and then you saw a face that carried a trace of the real, and your soul, which recognizes the real even when your mind does not, responded with everything it had. Eros has you now, the child of poverty and resource, never fully satisfied, never without hope, always reaching towards something just beyond the last rung. You can stay on the first rung. Most people do. You can make the face the destination and spend years in the cycle of longing and getting and losing and longing again. There's nothing wrong with you if you do. It is a very human way to live. Or you can ask what the face is pointing at, not to abandon the person, not to float away into abstraction and pretend that real love with a real human being is beneath the philosopher, but to hold both things at once, to love the person and to know that what moves between you is something larger than both of you. To let the love be a doorway rather than a destination. To follow Eros not just to the face but through it, along the ladder, toward whatever your soul has been trying to find its way back to since the moment it forgot that it once knew everything. That is what Plato was pointing at. Not the suppression of love, the completion of it. The person woke something up in you. Now follow it all the way home.